Imagine 3 million pages of secrets, finally unsealed. Names of the powerful, names of the elite. And buried in those documents, hints connecting Jeffrey Epstein to world leaders like Vladimir Putin himself. But here's the question that keeps everyone up at night. Why is so much of it still blacked out? In February 2026, the Department of Justice dropped what might be the biggest document release in true crime history. The Epstein Files. Millions of pages, years of secrets. And yet, massive portions remain hidden from public view. 6 men were named publicly. Connections to Russia were exposed. And the internet exploded with one burning question: who are they protecting? If you've been following this case, you know it's never been simple. Every answer brings 10 new questions. Every document reveals another layer of power, secrecy, and corruption that goes deeper than anyone imagined. Welcome to Strange Chapter, where we uncover what they don't want you to know. Today, we're diving into the Epstein Files 2026 Bombshell. The names, the redactions, the Putin connection, and the mysteries that still haunt us. Let's begin. To understand why these files matter so much, we need to go back to the beginning. Back to when Jeffrey Epstein was just another wealthy financier living in Palm Beach, Florida. The year was 2005. Police received a report from the mother of a 14-year-old girl. She claimed that her daughter had been paid $300 to give a massage to a man at his mansion. That man was Jeffrey Epstein. What started as a single complaint turned into something much bigger. Palm Beach police launched an investigation. They interviewed victim after victim. The stories were horrifyingly similar. Teenage girls, some as young as 14, recruited to Epstein's mansion, promised money for massages, then coerced into sexual acts. The evidence was overwhelming. Police identified at least 34 confirmed victims. Federal prosecutors could have charged Epstein with sex trafficking across state lines. He could have faced life in prison. But that's not what happened. In 2008, Epstein's legal team, led by high-powered attorney Alan Dershowitz, negotiated a deal that would become one of the most controversial plea agreements in American history. The Sweetheart Deal, as it's now called. Epstein pleaded guilty to just 2 state charges: soliciting prostitution from a minor. That's it. Instead of life in prison, he got 13 months in county jail. And even that wasn't real jail time. He was allowed to leave 6 days a week for work release. 12 hours a day, he could go to his office. The federal investigation was shut down. The victims were never told about the deal until after it was signed. And the public had no idea how deep this went. For more than a decade, Epstein lived freely. He traveled between his mansions in New York, Palm Beach, New Mexico, and Paris. He threw parties on his private island in the Caribbean, a place that would later become known by a much darker name, Pedophile Island. Flight logs from his private jet, nicknamed the Lolita Express, showed trips with politicians, celebrities, scientists, and royalty. Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, academics from Harvard and MIT. The guest list read like a who's who of global power. But Epstein's world started crumbling in 2018. The Miami Herald published a groundbreaking investigation called Perversion of Justice. Reporter Julie Brown tracked down dozens of victims and exposed the corruption behind Epstein's Sweetheart Deal. The public outcry was immediate. Federal prosecutors in New York reopened the case. On July 6, 2019, FBI agents arrested Jeffrey Epstein at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. He'd just flown in from Paris. This time, the charges were serious: sex trafficking of minors, conspiracy. He was denied bail and sent to the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan. Then came August 10, 2019. Guards found Jeffrey Epstein unresponsive in his cell. He was pronounced dead at a nearby hospital. The official cause? Suicide by hanging. But almost immediately, questions emerged. How did the cameras malfunction? Why were guards sleeping? Why was he taken off suicide watch just days earlier? The phrase Epstein didn't kill himself became a cultural phenomenon. Memes spread across the internet, conspiracy theories exploded, and the world demanded answers. While Epstein was gone, the case wasn't over. Federal prosecutors shifted focus to his longtime associate and alleged madam, Ghislaine Maxwell. Maxwell was arrested in July 2020. Her trial began in November 2021. Victims testified about how she recruited them, groomed them, and delivered them to Epstein. The jury found her guilty on 5 of 6 counts, including sex trafficking of minors. In June 2022, Maxwell was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. But even with Epstein dead and Maxwell behind bars, the biggest question remained unanswered. Who else was involved? Who visited that island? Who knew what was happening? And why hasn't anyone else been charged? That's where the files come in. The fight to unseal the Epstein files didn't start in 2026. It's been a years-long battle involving lawsuits, court orders, and mounting public pressure. Let's trace how we got here. The story begins with Virginia Giuffre, one of Epstein's most vocal victims. In 2015, Giuffre filed a defamation lawsuit against Ghislaine Maxwell. Maxwell had publicly called Giuffre a liar for claiming she was trafficked to powerful men, including Prince Andrew. That lawsuit created a paper trail, depositions, witness statements, flight logs, communications. All of it became part of the legal record. For years, those documents remained sealed, but media organizations and the public fought to have them released. They argued the public had a right to know who was involved in Epstein's crimes. In 2019, a federal judge ordered the release of thousands of pages from the Giuffre-Maxwell case. The documents included names, flight records, and testimony about Epstein's operation. But that was just the beginning. After Epstein's death, pressure mounted for full transparency. Congress got involved. In December 2023, lawmakers set a deadline for the release of all remaining sealed documents related to Epstein's case. The deadline came and went. The Trump administration's Department of Justice requested delays. They cited ongoing investigations, national security concerns, and privacy rights of individuals who weren't charged with crimes. Critics argued this was a cover-up. They demanded to know what was being hidden and why. Finally, in late January 2026, the DOJ announced a massive release. Over 3 million pages of documents would be made public in phases throughout February. The first wave dropped on February 3, 2026. Researchers, journalists, and internet sleuths immediately began combing through the files. The sheer volume was staggering: 3 million pages, depositions spanning hundreds of hours, financial records showing money flowing to shell companies across the globe. But here's what shocked everyone. Huge portions were redacted. Entire sections blacked out. Names replaced with codes like John Doe 1 and Jane Doe 15. The government claimed redactions were necessary to protect privacy and ongoing investigations. But the public saw it differently. If there was nothing to hide, why hide so much? Then came the second release on February 10, 2026, and this time the bombshell started dropping. And unlike the first wave, this one included names, real names, powerful names. 6 men were publicly identified in connection with Epstein's network. Let me be clear, being named doesn't mean they were charged with crimes, but the documents showed they had contact with Epstein, visited his properties, or appeared in communications that raised serious questions. The identities varied: business executives, foreign nationals, individuals with connections to finance and politics. Some names were already rumored in online circles. Others were complete surprises. The documents detailed flights on Epstein's private jet, visits to his New York mansion, attendance at gatherings on his island, phone records showing repeated calls, email exchanges that painted a picture of a network far larger than previously understood. But the biggest shock, the Putin connection. Buried in the February 10th release were documents showing Epstein's efforts to cultivate relationships with Russian elites. The files revealed attempts to build bridges between American financiers and powerful figures in Moscow. Now, let's be very careful here. The documents do not show direct contact between Epstein and Vladimir Putin himself, but they do show Epstein's network included individuals with close ties to the Kremlin, oligarchs, business leaders with connections to Russian intelligence, people who moved in Putin's orbit. Why would Epstein want these connections? The documents suggest a few possibilities. First, money. Russia's ultra-wealthy were looking for ways to invest and move money globally. Epstein positioned himself as a connector, someone who could open doors. Second, influence. Having relationships with Russian power players gave Epstein leverage. It made him more valuable to others in his network. Third, and this is where it gets dark, compromat. That's the Russian term for compromising material. If Epstein was collecting information on powerful people, having connections to Russian intelligence services would make that information even more valuable. The files also included new details about what happened on Epstein's island. Victim testimony described being flown there under false pretenses, arriving to find parties already underway, being pressured into situations they couldn't escape. Staff members were interviewed. They described seeing famous faces, politicians, celebrities, scientists, people whose names you'd recognize instantly. But here's the frustrating part. Many of those names are still redacted. Page after page shows blacked out sections. You can see the structure of sentences. You can tell names were there, but you can't read them. The Dodge claims these redactions protect people who were witnesses but not participants. They say some individuals visited Epstein's properties for legitimate business reasons and had no knowledge of his crimes. Maybe that's true for some, but the public isn't buying it. Because if you're innocent, why hide? The February releases also included financial records that raised new questions. Millions of dollars moving through shell companies, payments to individuals whose names were redacted, transactions that seemed designed to obscure the true flow of money. Investigators noticed patterns. Money would flow from Epstein's accounts to a company in the British Virgin Islands, then to another company in Luxembourg, then to a private account in Switzerland. The trail was intentionally complex. Who was receiving this money? What was it for? Or if they do, those sections are redacted. By mid-February 2026, researchers had indexed thousands of pages. They created databases, cross-referenced names, and built timelines. Online communities worked together, sharing discoveries and theories. Some findings were explosive, others were disappointingly vague. But one thing became crystal clear. The full story is still being hidden. The question everyone's asking is simple: why? If these documents are part of a closed investigation, why not release everything? If people are innocent, why protect them with redactions? The official answer is legal liability, privacy rights, witness protection. But many believe the real answer is much simpler. The people named in those files are too powerful to expose. Let's talk about what we still don't know. Because despite 3 million pages of documents, the biggest mysteries remain unsolved. First, the question that won't go away: did Jeffrey Epstein really kill himself? The official story is suicide. Epstein hanged himself with a bedsheet in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center. The medical examiner ruled it suicide, case closed. But the circumstances were bizarre. Epstein was on suicide watch after a previous incident, then suddenly taken off it. The cameras that should have recorded his cell malfunctioned. Both guards assigned to check on him every 30 minutes were asleep. His cellmate had been transferred out just hours before. A private autopsy commissioned by Epstein's family found injuries more consistent with strangulation than hanging. The pathologist pointed to broken bones in Epstein's neck that rarely occur in suicides but are common in homicides. So what really happened? Theories range from suicide enabled by intentional negligence to outright murder orchestrated by powerful people who wanted him silenced. We may never know the truth. The investigation into his death was closed without charges against anyone. Second mystery: where's the full client list? Epstein allegedly kept detailed records. Names, dates, activities, a black book of contacts that included some of the most powerful people on Earth. Some of that information has been released: flight logs, phone records. But many believe there's more. A comprehensive list of everyone who participated in or knew about Epstein's crimes. If such a list exists, it hasn't been made public. Are those names in the redacted sections? Is there a separate cache of documents still sealed? Or did Epstein destroy the most damaging evidence before his arrest? Third, who else will be charged? Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison, but she didn't act alone. The documents describe other recruiters, other facilitators, people who helped arrange travel, set up properties, and maintain the infrastructure of Epstein's operation. So far, no one else has been charged. The Dodge says investigations are ongoing, but years have passed since Epstein's death. At what point do we accept that the powerful will never face justice? Here's a theory that keeps circulating. Epstein was protected because he had intelligence connections. Some researchers believe he worked with foreign intelligence services, possibly even American ones, to gather compromising information on influential people. If true, that would explain a lot. Why he got the sweetheart deal in 2008. Why so many documents remain classified. Why no one else has been prosecuted. It would mean Epstein's entire operation was allowed to continue because he was useful to someone. And if that's true, releasing the full files could expose intelligence operations, diplomatic relationships, and secrets that governments want buried forever. Is that what's happening? We don't have proof. But the pattern of protection, the unusual legal treatment, and the extreme secrecy all point in that direction. Finally, let's talk about what happens next. The February 2026 releases aren't the end. More documents are scheduled to be unsealed throughout the year. Court cases continue. New victims come forward. This story is far from over, but here's what I want you to think about. Who do you think they're protecting? Are the redactions really about privacy and legal procedure? Or is there a coordinated effort to shield the powerful from consequences? Drop your theory in the comments below, because this is a mystery we're all trying to solve together. Let's recap what we've uncovered today. Jeffrey Epstein ran a trafficking operation that ensnared dozens of young girls and connected him to some of the most powerful people in the world. After his suspicious death in 2019, a years-long fight for transparency finally resulted in the release of over 3 million pages of documents in February 2026. Those files revealed 6 men publicly named in connection with Epstein's network. They exposed his attempts to build relationships with Russian elites, potentially including figures close to Vladimir Putin. And they showed us just how much is still being hidden through massive redactions. The Epstein Files 2026 Bombshell gave us answers, but it also gave us more questions. Questions about who knew what. Questions about who's being protected. Questions about whether justice will ever truly be served. This is the kind of story Strange Chapter exists to cover. The cases they don't want you digging into. The secrets they hope you'll forget. The truth hiding beneath layers of redactions and legal maneuvering. If you want to stay updated on the Epstein files as more documents are released, hit that subscribe button right now. Click the bell so you never miss an upload. We'll be covering every major development as this story continues to unfold, and I want to hear from you. What shocked you most about the Epstein Files 2026? Who do you think is still being protected? What questions do you need answered? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's figure this out together. Share this video with anyone who's been following the Epstein case. The more people who know the truth, the harder it becomes to bury it. Thanks for watching Strange Chapter. And remember, the truth is stranger than fiction. You just have to know where to look.